Welcome to Bridges episode number 3, and today we're going specific. The last 2 episodes, we've been setting up foundations for ideas. And what I'm going to do intermittent throughout the series is I'm going to bounce into specific examples. So what I've done is I've taken a P&L from a brand, I've changed a bunch of the numbers, I've taken all their identifying attributes off it, I've reorganized the P&L such that this is illustrative of a real scenario. Again, the numbers have changed, it's not specific, but it is illustrative of a real scenario. And what I want to walk you through is how, as marketers, we're able to consume the P&L and use it then to inform the media strategy going forward and to think about how this brand can get into the best financial position possible. So let's take a look. Okay. What I want us to notice is we've got revenue from 3 different sources here. Okay, we've got Amazon, we've got Shopify, and we've got wholesale. We've got a total income line then here that represents the revenue for the business. It's broken out into all the right sort of discounts, return rates, etc., but I'm going to consolidate that for the ease of simplicity. Then what I've done is I've organized all of the cost of delivery. So if we look over here, you'll notice that we've got all of our cost of delivery items, everything from product cost to shipping supplies, to outbound, or to freight out, to Shopify payment processor fees, Amazon fees, FBA fees, etc. So we get product costs, shipping costs, processing fees to our total cost of delivery. This business is in the apparel category, okay? And so what I want us to understand about the ideas that we had talked about in previous videos around 4-quarter accounting, the initial video, this idea that you could divide the P&L up into categories and those categories would provide benchmarks, understandings, is that every industry's composition of those metrics is slightly different. In apparel, it's wildly difficult to actually get to a gross profit number or a total cost of delivery that's in that 25% range. It's just not going to happen, usually related to the quantities of variable SKUs that you have to order, MOQ restrictions, as well as return rates that often cause problems, discounting that's common in the space, and just the complexity of production. You're just not going to get too much better. 60% in apparel is really great, 70 is amazing, and 50 is closer to standard. And so you can see here, we begin to illustrate and highlight those main line items that we talked about, that 4-quarter accounting, which if you haven't watched in episode 1, go back and watch that. But for now, you're going to see these green highlighted sections where I have pulled out those highlighted sections of total cost of delivery in this case. As we scroll down, I have isolated the advertising out of the OpEx. I want to separate that out from my general expenses. And this is specifically ad dollars that are intended to drive direct response revenue. When I pull it into a section called advertising, you can see that here. Then everything below here is going to be my operating expenses. So all of your standard marketing fees, fuel, workers' comp, health insurance, promotional activities, product seating, office equipment, etc., down to a total line item of total operating expenses. Some might refer to this as SG&A, and then net operating income. Okay, now this is the part I want you to notice. And this may be for some people, hard to conceptualize, but I want you to imagine a business in this scenario that has raised funding that began in 2021 or 2022 or previously under a thesis of driving incremental, large top-line revenue growth. They raised money under that thesis, and that is the modus operandi of the organization going forward. And suddenly, as the available capital that they have remaining begins to dwindle, the ability to raise incremental capital in this environment today is gone. There is no more fundraising under that thesis. Nobody is funding negative profitable growth. And so what you have here is a business that was operating in a previous era. And you can see that the net operating income, losing 600, 400, 300, 700, 600 millions of dollars over the course of a year in net burn to generate what is, incremental growth 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 8, 1, 7. So the top line growth is occurring. That's pretty fast growth. You've got, almost 30% growth from January to June. Again, an era of fueling top line growth that suddenly runs into a wall of lack of available financing. And this is very common. We run into this scenario this day and age all the time, where suddenly there's an obligation for this business to be self-sustaining and profitable. And the good news is it's doable. And the red line delineates when we show up at Common Thread Collective and we begin to help them on this endeavor. And the first thing we do is to take and consume a P&L like this and make sure that we can understand where the revenue is being destroyed. And therefore, what then can we do about it? So this red line coming up in August here is illustrative of when we showed up and began to make changes to the P&L. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this 4-quarter accounting table that's going to give us a very quick glimpse. You saw this in the P&L that we shared. If you go back again to that first episode, if you go look at the template that I shared, you'll see this table in that where we have 4-quarter accounting broken up by cost of delivery, CAC, OpEx, and profit, and how much of the revenue is going into each category. And if we look at these initial months, you'll see that the cost of delivery average over that time comes out to, let's see here, we've got an average of about 53%. Now, generally speaking, this isn't going to be the first area that we attack unless this percentage is comprised mainly of shipping and fulfillment costs. So what we want to first do is we want to go, okay, 50%, 53%, it's a little higher than we would like to see for apparel, but we want to understand our ability to move it quickly. And the two primary levers as a marketing growth partner provider, it's very hard to affect the product cost. That takes negotiation with the manufacturer, finding new suppliers. It's a very complex process. The two things that we care a lot about are 1, discount rate, and 2, shipping costs, shipping and fulfillment expense as a percentage of this revenue. So if we go back and look, what I've done is I break out the shipping and fulfillment expense. And what I would do is I'd go, okay, let's think about this from a cost of delivery standpoint. And let's look at just shipping percentage. So now I'm taking a slightly deeper dive into a component. I go total shipping and fulfillment. And what I want to see is that this number is not substantially greater than 10%. Okay. Ideally, it's, less than 10%, but if I can get this number somewhere around 10%, okay. So I'm at 11. The average here is about 11% in terms of what shipping represents as a portion of that revenue. Okay. Another thing I want to understand in this case is I want to understand the net shipping expense. So if that's how much shipping costs are, I want to understand how much shipping revenue I realize and the relationship between shipping percentage and shipping revenue. Okay. That's not the problem here, so I'm not going to dive into it. But if you needed to solve this, if this was at 18%, or if your shipping and fulfillment is 20% of revenue or 18% of revenue, unless you're shipping furniture or some giant object, you want to see this number get closer to 10%. And you want to think about the relationship of your net shipping revenue realized from the customer, as well as shipping cost. If you can get that to net zero or even positive contribution, man, that is a beautiful thing. Now there's going to be some relationship between that and conversion rate. But for now, I look at this guy, I go, okay, maybe there's something to be gained here. I'll ask the customer a question about it, but there's not a massive problem here. This is within the realm of reality where product costs sit at 40%, shipping's at 10. Okay, I'm in the realm of there's not an immediate obvious lever in this piece. As I move down the chain then, and I go, okay, cost of delivery is within a reasonable range. Again, not ideal, but reasonable. CAC is next. And when I look at CAC, right away I see, okay, we're at almost 35% of revenue. We're going to set that over here because we're coming back to that hard. That's too high. 35% of revenue is too high for a business at this stage. We need to get that down below 25%. But this is where the most obvious issue is, right? Is the OpEx illustrates to me the obvious immediate lever point where we have a operating expenses that are exceeding almost 44% on average. You cannot in 2024 run a profitable e-commerce business with SG&A or OpEx at 44% unless your product margins are 90%. And because this is apparel, that's never going to be the case. It is an obligation that you find a way to drive your OpEx sub 25%. So for us, that's an issue that we can highlight. And as a marketer, I can understand that if a brand is telling me that I need a CAC that is better and a ROAS that is better because they are carrying an OpEx that is north of 40%, I have a point to go, time out. This is not an efficiency of acquisition problem. This is primarily an OpEx problem. We have to go solve that. Now, in the very beginning of a business, when you're the one employee and there's no revenue, that OpEx as a percentage is going to be disproportionate. So I'm speaking to 8-figure brands right now. This may be higher earlier in your stage of business when you're not making any money. But if you are trying to be profitable in this day and age, when you have to drive incremental contribution and you have to drive cash flow and you have to drive a business that can grow, you cannot run an OpEx. And the leverage point for e-commerce is actually a lean OpEx. It's operating leverage on an employee base that can be small relative to the revenue per employee that can be generated. And so the businesses that are driving 20 to 30% net profit margins have an OpEx that is sub 20% in almost every case. So this is a point of leverage where we can bring this insight to the customer and have a conversation. And we can begin to look at the actual composition of the OpEx to see what's happening. And the first place I always go in terms of thinking about that is related to payroll. Now, empathizing very consciously with the reality that there is a human cost to the conversation that we're about to have, I have to still live in reality that the relationship between the headcount of the business and the revenue that that business generates have to be in line. And if I think about OpEx in total needing to be sub 25%, my payroll, full-time employee headcount needs to be sub 15% of revenue and should be closer to 10. If you want to think about if you have the right staffing for your e-commerce business, sub 15% payroll, closer to 10% FTE. Here's why. E-commerce is a seasonal business. It is not a fixed employee business, okay? FTE businesses that should be built on full-time staffing should be businesses where there is no variability in the revenue or where the revenue is consistently moving up and to the right. When you have seasonal revenue where you have dramatic swings from December to January, from June to July, you have to be able to flex your staffing. You have to be able to flex your staffing. This is why agencies are important support partners, why contractors are important support partners, is because you can flex the contract and payments up and down. Full-time employee staffing at this level, almost 30% of revenue will never work. You will never be able to make money as an e-commerce business in the state. So we have to figure out where the leverage point is to get this number down. Now, that is a hard conversation. Again, I'm empathetic to it. It also is latent. There's usually either PTO payouts or severance or other considerations that it doesn't just instantly show up in the P&L the next month, but you have to consider it. You have to. You cannot survive and build a profitable e-commerce business. You're jeopardizing the entirety of the business if you're at this rate. Okay, so that's an area of point of conversation. Another thing that is, in this case, exemplary is the amount of rent that exists. Okay, this is almost 5% of the revenue. It is very difficult for an e-commerce business to sustain itself with office expenses that are 5% of revenue. It is going to make your OpEx really, you better be really lean staffing. And the idea that you need a giant office for a small staff is not real. So what happens when you get lifestyle bloat is you get too many people and you need too much space for those too many people and you've compounded the problem. So a lot of times these are commitments that are movable. They're leases that are paid for that you can't just opt out of, but subletting space, finding some way to reduce this expense in that scenario is an absolute must do. This is the benefit of remote work. Also, it creates a leverage point on your P&L on an OpEx standpoint when that happens. I've seen a lot of people take on their own warehousing for this expense reason. It is very difficult to do that effectively and efficiently unless it is a core competency of your organization. It almost always results in waste from what I have seen on the P&L. And those are two immediate areas that jump out. There's a bunch of other things that we can nitpick with. And oftentimes we don't want to take the responsibility of going through your P&L on a line item basis and saying this one, that one. We want to say to you, on the basis of the profile of your business with what's possible in the future on the customer acquisition side, here's where you need to get your OpEx in order to be profitable. Go find the savings. And as a marketer, you will never succeed with the cost of delivery at 50% and OpEx at 50%. There's no margin left, right? So if my gross margin as an apparel business is going to sit perpetually somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60%, my OpEx has to be lean. Apparel brands, you have to be lean if you're going to target getting to 20% profitability. So let's talk about what we did. We make that recommendation on the OpEx side. We have the conversation around cost of delivery. We talk about discounting. We talk about the shipping rates. We give them some ideas to go play around with that. But most importantly, what we begin to think about is what is the obligation that we have to cover with our revenue in order to make profit on the P&L in 30 days. So what do I mean by that? Okay, remember in the first episode, I talked about this idea, and even the last episode too, I talked about the relationship between existing customer contribution margin and operating expenses. This informs how aggressive I can be in new customer acquisition. Do I have enough existing customer revenue to cover the operating expenses of my business such that I can make profit? So if I go down and I find this line item here and I go down and I say, okay, what is my monthly OpEx going to be, assuming that we get it under control? And I go, okay, we're targeting a decrease in operating expenses so you can see the work the brand did to go reduce those expenses, okay? So $470, this is the month we're going to target profitability. It's how we drove them to profitability. I have to get over $470,000 in expenses in order to generate profit. The next thing I need to understand is how much existing customer contribution margin do I have, which is just their revenue, the existing customer revenue minus the cost of delivery. That informs then how aggressive I can be on new customer acquisition. Because if I need my new customers to generate incremental contribution margin to cover my OpEx, then I have to be first order profitable. And it helps me think about how first order profitable I have to be. How much new customer contribution margin do I have to generate? So let's take a look at the media performance. And what is the action then in light of that? So above the red line, you have the pre-CTC era of spending money. And what I want you to notice is AdWords spend ranging at about an average of $50,000 a month, high ROAS inflated by brand. And what I actually see is for product categories like this, you actually want to see if the bulk of your media is on brand search, you need this ROAS to be even higher than that. This often means that you can be spending too aggressively on your own brand terms. That's a whole separate episode we could do. But look at this Facebook spend, averaging almost $500,000 a month, $480,000 a month. At basically, this is a seven-day click Facebook ROAS of about break even, about a 1. This is an average of 1.03. If I have 50% cost of delivery and I'm spending 100% of my money, of my revenue on my CAC, I am driving negative new customer contribution margin every month. And for a brand with an LTV like this, you'll be net never profitable. It'll be years before you get a single percentage point return on capital on that number. Do not, as an apparel business, run your Facebook ROAS at a 1. Do not do it. You will never make money. You will never make money. TikTok, exact same thing. Okay? And so what you end up with is here's your spend, here's your total online revenue, here's your MER, here's your new customer revenue, but here's your new customer contribution margin. Every month, driving negative new customer contribution, deteriorating the total dollars that are flowing through to your bottom line. And it's showing up in the AMER. You can see there's a really tight correlation between the AMER and the Meta spend because all of that new customer revenue basically is being generated from Meta, or a lot of it, at least is on a reported basis, is showing up there. But my AMER is about the same. Now, what that tells me is I am destroying capital in my acquisition. Okay, so right away, we're going, hold on, time out. This money is no good. But the question is, how good do I need it to be in order to make money? And that answer actually lies in looking at my returning customer revenue. So we isolate that. So if we look at our total revenue, we subtract out our new customer revenue, we get to returning customer revenue, and I get to returning customer contribution margin. The returning customer contribution margin shows me how many incremental dollars I need to generate in order to get to profit. So the relationship between this number, the existing customers that I already have that I'm not paying for, how much profit, contribution margin that are flowing through to cover OpEx gives me that relationship. So again, remember, I have $496,000 in expenses in this month, okay? The month of October, the month we actually help them turn the corner and generate profit. I know my returning customers because we're going to build an LTV specific or cohort specific LTV model to forecast where I'm going to get here. We're going to get to about $400,000 in contribution margin, okay? I know I have coming about $45,000 in Amazon revenue and about $350,000 in wholesale business. I know those numbers. Wholesale business is about 50% gross margin after total contribution after the cost is about 25% of that. So I know I've got about $100,000 here and about, let's say after all the Amazon fees, another $20,000. I've got $120,000 of incremental contribution for those channels. 120 plus 400 is 520. So between my returning customer contribution margin, my other channel contribution margin, I'm covering my OpEx. Remember, going back down to October, what am I saying? OpEx, okay, total expenses, $467,000. So that means that if I can drive, as long as my new customer contribution margin doesn't deteriorate my revenue, deteriorate my contribution, I know that I can make money, that I can get this business to profitable. So what do? You can see that our action immediately for this business is to cut spend dramatically. We go from spending almost $55,000 a month on AdWords to $27,000 a month on Google. ROAS goes up. You can see we continue to drive that number down, being more efficient on AdWords, tightening up the cost per click models, really ensuring that we have a TROAS high enough to warrant spend. Same thing on Meta. Boom, cost caps introduced, targeting a 7-day click of break even. So we're looking at like a 1.5 target Facebook ROAS on a 7-day click basis, which we know is conservative relative to the overflow. That's going to get us to ultimately what we have a goal for, which is a break-even AMER. That's really the thing we're after. And you can see, look at this AMER growth from down here to 168 to 177 to 212, whereby within 3 months of driving this spend down, okay, driving the Facebook ROAS up, ensuring that we get to as close to first order profitability as possible, and eventually getting there, we go from losing $300,000 on new customer contribution margin to losing 30, to losing 20, to making money with our new customer acquisition. And we're scaling spend in the process. It's not even like we had to sacrifice that much top line revenue. The month before we show up, we do 129. In October, it's 121. Right away, there was so much waste and inefficiency in the ad spend trying to drive top line revenue growth that we took way less new customer revenue. You can see again, dropped it down to 300, 412. This is that frothy beer photo that I posted. This is all of this incremental revenue here that's in excess of what I have here is not profitable. Every dollar spent above this deteriorated contribution margin further and deteriorated the P&L. This business never had to be unprofitable. It always had the underlying potential for profit. And now the job is to continue to see how much incremental spend we can stack while holding this rigorous, diligent constraint of AMER. At 50% gross margin, we have to have a 2-to-1 AMER in order to be first order profitable. This business, in order to continue to scale, we either have to get continually leaner on the OpEx, but we want to grow the business, right? We're not trying to just go backwards. So we got to generate returning customer contribution in excess of 400,000, continue to grow wholesale and Amazon along the way. New customer contribution becomes a positive, accretive part of the business. And the relationship now between how we plan the OpEx, when we hire, who we hire, what investments we make, when we try testing out a new channel, when we invest in R&D, when we get a new office, is all related to the growth of the existing customer revenue. And now, as the marketing team forecasts the plan and begins to give you a model for the future, you can begin to plan the growth in the investment in the business alongside the cash flow, because we are no longer wasting cash. And instantaneously, a brand that in the first 6 months of running is losing millions of dollars, millions in the first 6 months, can turn to profitability. And the actions are not that, they require hard decisions. I empathize with those hard decisions. They require becoming a little bit more frugal, letting go of some of the privileges and pleasures that we enjoyed along the way and building something rad. And we said, hey, we're going to enter a period of austerity. We're going to get healthy. And then we're going to develop the muscles for driving profitable new customer acquisition. And that becomes the governing principle that leads the organization that we help set. And this is why cost controls become so critical, is because it ensures that you don't waste when you don't have the money to waste. Because guess what? This business does not have another fundraising round. There is no bank debt available because your TTM EBITDA is a disaster. And so if you go add in revenue-based financing, you actually aren't likely going to be able to produce enough free cash flow to even pay off the interest rates. Not yet. Maybe soon. We can go get lending soon, but we have to get healthy. Now, the good news is, if I were to add in November and December here, which I didn't do because they were just such outliers, because the revenue, your performance is so good, that gets you into a healthy cash position where now actually maybe you can go get some of that financing because you can actually have the cash position to afford to cover the interest rate as you grow. And that's the game. And that's why, as a marketer, the first place I start with the business is the P&L. Because I'm not going to be given an objective for CAC that is about covering for the sins of the OpEx. And if I can actually provide guidance and coaching and support to how to think about how much we need to spend and why, and how we help get the business to growth, my relationship with the finance team, with the CFO, is just going to go through the roof, because the decisions I'm making are going to be connected and cohesive with the business and financial objective of the organization. So ask for the P&L. Divide it up into your 4-quarter accounting. Think about how much existing customer revenue you have, how much then that informs the new customer contribution margin you have to create. Go save every dollar. Go find the ability, every dollar you can, into acquisition of new customers, because the more of those new customers I can acquire at break even, the faster my existing customer revenue grows, the more we can grow the entirety of the business. And that's the game. You want to make You want to take as many dollars out of the OpEx as you can, as dollars as you can out of the cost of delivery, and you want to insert them directly into the marketing and acquisition of new customers. That's going to fuel your growth. And you want to do it at a way that doesn't deteriorate your contribution margin. 25 minutes. This is a real example. This is happening all the time around our industry. We are living this with so many brands. And I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to give you a philosophical principle. I'm going to show you a practical application. Give you a philosophical principle, show you a practical application. Because there is hope. You can get to profitability. This is a really freaking good business. They have done something awesome. And it's exciting to be a part of it because they don't have to live in this tension and anxiety of losing so much money under a form, as long as the shareholders and the people will get on board with, we're going to take a step back. We're going to reset the top line. We're going to let go of that frothy top, and we're going to rebuild profitably such that in 18 and 24 months, this is going to be an amazing business. It's a great product, awesome job that they've done on the business, and we're excited to be a part of it. But you, marketers and finance people, work together in this way. In an upcoming episode, I'm going to have a couple of the people on the other side of the bridge, a couple of finance folks join me for these conversations to illustrate how the dialogue around these topics can be so powerful for transforming your organization. Hope this helps. Hey, share this with somebody. Spread the word. Please give Bridges a like, share, comment, subscribe on YouTube. It means a lot to me. I'm going to keep pouring these out. Appreciate it.